In August 1976, the U.S. military launched a military operation involving aircraft carriers, nuclear-capable bombers, attack helicopters, hundreds of heavily armed soldiers, and 2 chainsaw-wielding engineers. The objective? Trim a tree. This is the story of Operation Paul Bunyan, and it is one of the most absurd, dangerous, and genuinely terrifying episodes of the Cold War, a moment when the world nearly slid into a second Korean War over a poplar tree on the border between North and South Korea. Let's set the scene. The Korean Demilitarized Zone is one of the most heavily fortified borders on Earth. It is 160 miles long, roughly 2.5 miles wide, and patrolled on both sides by soldiers who are, technically speaking, still at war. The Korean War ended with an armistice in 1953, not a peace treaty. This is a distinction that matters a great deal when you are standing in the DMZ holding a chainsaw. In the middle of the DMZ was a checkpoint called Checkpoint 3, and near that checkpoint was a poplar tree. The tree had grown large enough that it was blocking the sight lines between 2 United Nations observation posts, which was a significant problem when you were trying to monitor the movements of the North Korean military across one of the tensest borders in the world. On August 18, 1976, a U.S. Army captain named Arthur Boniface led a work party of South Korean workers and American soldiers to the checkpoint with the intention of trimming the tree. The tree was inside the DMZ, so, under the armistice terms, this required coordination with both sides. This had been done before. It was considered a routine operation. What was not routine was what happened next. A platoon of North Korean soldiers arrived. Their officer, a lieutenant named Pak Chul, initially watched the trimming operation without incident. Then, according to accounts from the surviving UN soldiers, Pak told Captain Boniface to stop. Boniface declined. Pak said something in Korean to his soldiers. By accounts from the surviving Americans, his exact words were translated as, "Kill them all." What followed was a brutal attack with the North Korean soldiers' own axes, the tools that had been brought to trim the tree. Captain Boniface was beaten to death. A second American officer, First Lieutenant Mark Barrett, was also killed. Several other soldiers were injured. The North Korean soldiers then withdrew across the border. The United States' response was Operation Paul Bunyan. The operation was approved by President Gerald Ford and Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, and it was, in its own way, one of the most carefully calibrated overreactions in military history. On August 21st, 3 days after the killings, a convoy of vehicles arrived at the tree. Inside were 2 8-man teams of U.S. Army engineers. Their job was to cut down the tree, not trim it, cut it down entirely.
Providing security for the 2 teams of tree cutters were a company of South Korean Special Forces soldiers who had reportedly been told they were allowed to respond to any North Korean attack with maximum force, 30 American MPs armed with pistols, and a contingent of American soldiers who arrived in the back of trucks which, at the appropriate moment, opened their tarps to reveal soldiers armed with axes, rifles, and anti-tank weapons. In the air, 20 attack helicopters, several B-52 Stratofortress bombers, nuclear-capable aircraft, flew toward the DMZ and then turned back in a maneuver explicitly designed to be visible to North Korean radar. The USS Midway and its carrier group moved into Korean waters. American and South Korean ground forces across the peninsula were placed on the highest peacetime alert level. All of this to cut down 1 tree. The engineers cut it down in 42 minutes. The North Korean guards at the border, faced with this extraordinary display of force, did not move. North Korea's response afterward was almost unprecedented in its restraint. Kim Il-sung issued a statement that was as close to an apology as North Korea had ever offered, expressing regret, though not specifically for the killings, at the incident at Panmunjom. The statement was carefully worded, somewhat ambiguous, and clearly designed to de-escalate without admitting direct culpability. It worked in the sense that the situation did not escalate further. The tree stump was left in place. It remains there today, though the site has since been modified. The tree itself was measured after it was felled. It was approximately 40 feet tall. Operation Paul Bunyan is studied in military academies as an example of calibrated deterrence, the use of overwhelming, visible, unambiguous force to communicate a message without triggering an engagement. The message in this case was, we are going to cut down this tree, and if anyone tries to stop us, what happens next will not be a discussion about a tree. No one tried to stop them. The operation worked. The border held. And somewhere in the archives of the United States Army, there is almost certainly a photograph of two engineers in the Korean DMZ, B-52 bombers overhead, and carrier groups offshore, cutting down a poplar tree with a chainsaw. History, when you look at it closely enough, is frequently stranger than anything you could invent. Hit subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.